Hey, Husker fans, welcome to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast with Chris Peterson and Danny Gillette. As always, go Big Red. Good morning, Husker fans, and welcome to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast. I'm Chris Peterson, and Danny Gillette is joining me as always, and we're back here on Monday morning for another episode of the podcast. Before we get into it, please make sure that you guys like the video and hit the subscribe button on the podcast if you haven't already, so you don't miss any of our future content. And also check out HuskerBigRed.com. We also have a lot of great content there. So, Danny, how you doing this morning?
Good. My Bruins won game one and my Celtics won game one yesterday, so it was a very good weekend for me. A Nebraska basketball commitment and less than a week until the spring game, 5 days. So actually, I'm all right this Monday morning. Still tired, but not as grumpy, and it's sunny, so that helps too.
Yeah, we got the spring game, NBA playoffs. I guess the NHL play. I don't watch hockey, so I have no idea what's happening with that. Yeah, I haven't watched a hockey game in probably except I watched Michigan hockey, but that's about it. I just don't care about the NHL. Since they went on the strike, I don't know a single player in the NHL that's not a Michigan person. Is Alex Ovechkin still in the league? I know him.
Yep.
Sidney Crosby, I know him. That's it.
Yep.
I don't know any other player. I don't know a single other player in the NHL. Basically the same about the MLB. I could care less about it. I haven't watched a pitch of the World Series since the Cubs were in it. It's so boring. It's the most boring sport in the world. I'm sorry, but
I feel that way about the NBA kind of, but playoff basketball is always good. So I figured I'd watch and support the home team.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I don't watch a whole lot of. I'll watch some of the NBA, but the games are too long. They take 3 hours. They call way too many fouls. I get sick of watching. They need to allow the hand check again in the NBA because the fouls and all the free throw. I mean, you spend 25% of the game watching guys at the free throw line. I don't want to watch that.
I agree with that. Yeah.
It's 48 minutes. It takes 3 hours to watch. It takes as long to watch an NBA game almost as an NFL game. It's just insane to me. So, and they don't play defense. I mean, the playoffs, they do a little bit, but.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about what's allowed to be called, and they've definitely gotten a lot softer.
But, man, people who want to, throw the LeBron, Jordan would have scored 40 a game. Prime Michael Jordan would have scored 40 points a game in these rules because he can't, dude, he was getting absolutely mugged back in the day by the Knicks and the Pistons, and he still had a season where he scored 37 points per game. So, just get out of my face with the LeBron talk. Jordan would have averaged over 40 a game with these rules the way they are today. He would have lived at the free throw line.
I agree, and there's a lot. I'm not gonna say there's a lot tougher competition because I think the athletes are better, but there was definitely more excitement and stars back in the day.
But let's talk a little Nebraska now. We got the spring game coming up this week, spring practice. We had the second scrimmage was completed on Saturday. Dylan Raiola was awesome again. It made some incredible throws, a couple that stood out to Jalen Lloyd in the highlight reels. Heinrich Harburg led a 99-yard drive. Matt Rule said all three quarterbacks played well. He's not going to name a starter yet, and I don't think I would make zero sense to name a starting quarterback right now in the spring anyway. Unless you already have an established starter, I guess. But what are you looking forward to on Saturday for the spring game?
Gotta say the quarterbacks. I mean, it would be stupid of me to pretend it's anything else. I mean, I'm excited to see Dylan and Danny and even Heinrich. I mean, Heinrich has been playing well this spring, so I'm curious to see what he does. I mean, I don't think at the end of the day, is he going to be a key contributor in the quarterback room? Probably not, but I'm curious to see what his development has been this offseason and, how much Glenn Thomas has helped him out. So I'm excited for the quarterbacks and I'm excited for the wide receivers, and I think there's a lot of depth there and there's a lot of talent there and we'll get to see it. And just kind of an interesting side note here on the defensive side of the ball, Matt Rule said over the weekend that if he were to name a corner opposite Tommy Hill, it would be Bly Hill. So, I think Bly Hill is somebody to watch, and he's definitely gotten tested with this group of receivers over the course of this spring. So how that secondary lines up will be interesting to me as well. I know you asked what I'm looking forward to, and I could basically say the whole game, but those three things are what I'm looking forward to on Saturday, and I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it will be fun. I'm not sure exactly, the format in terms of how long they're going to play or if they're going to have, running clock. I'm assuming it'll be all live except the quarterbacks, because Nebraska's not, it's like Ohio State doing tackling with their starters. So yeah, it is going to be exciting to see Dylan Raiola. I'm assuming that it's going to the first two quarterbacks are going to be Heinrich Harburg and Dylan Raiola. That's my guess.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that roster, is kind of split up, because it's not like you've got four quarterbacks to go on two teams. I'm not sure exactly, if they're going to divide it up into two teams, which I think that's what they did last year. I'm trying to think back, or if they just
Yeah.
had like versus defense, because some teams do it different. Some programs will just have like the offense will play the defense and they have points that way. Some teams will, like Michigan, literally split up, their offenses and defenses into a maize and a blue squad, and they just played an actual game, which I prefer. I prefer that method. I think it's more competitive. So I hope that's what we see on Saturday. But yeah, I'm excited to see all three quarterbacks. Raiola, I think, has obviously, set himself above everybody else in terms of trying to be the starter. I mean, he is going to be the starter. I don't think there's any question about that. Daniel Kalen's played very well. I think Heinrich Harburg can have a wildcat type role. I've talked about that a bunch. But I'm excited to see the running backs, because, this is a first chance to really evaluate them live. Dante Dowdell, Emmett Johnson, with live tackling and stuff, I really want to see, how they've developed. But I feel good about, where the running back room is at. I thought it was interesting. Nebraska was in contact with the Toledo, Louisville transfer running back. I'm trying, Penny Boone, I think is his name.
Boone, yep.
So I thought that was a bit interesting, but overall, it's gone about the way I thought it would for Nebraska in the transfer portal. Nobody out, nobody in. I mean, yes, I know Eric Fields and Corey Collier technically entered the portal, but they haven't been on the spring roster, so I really wouldn't even count those as departures.
No, I wouldn't either. And you heard. I don't know if you heard, but Matt Rule said that Amon Green was impressed with Emmett Johnson at practice over the weekend. So when you can impress Amon Green, you're doing something right. And so, we saw it kind of last year. He really played at a high level, and I thought that we didn't run the football enough with Johnson. And so it's good to see him kind of building off that, heading into the spring and continuing to assert himself in the running back room. And you hate to see injuries, but sometimes injuries lead to players breaking out and other opportunities. So that's what happened with Johnson last year, and he's just continuing to, no pun intended, carry it over.
Yeah, he took advantage of his opportunities. Most of his games, he was over 4 yards per carry. He had a big touchdown against Purdue that helped put that game away. So he did create, some explosive runs too. He had some plus 20-yard runs against Big Ten teams. It's not like this was against, Louisiana Tech or whoever.
Yeah.
I mean, he got the most of his work in the Big Ten, so that's pretty translatable. I do like where he sits. I think he's been very productive. I mean, ever since I saw him in that slam dunk competition, he's looked like a different guy. And I think a lot of guys on this team you can say that about, which I think goes back to, Corey Campbell, the strength coach, the nutrition programs, all that stuff that, Matt Rule mentioned on Saturday in his press conference of why guys want to stay here. Well, they've got the best nutrition, the best fan base, the best sports medicine, in his opinion, some of the best strength coach. He's going to develop you for the NFL. So Nebraska has a lot to sell right now, and it's working, but they've got to win games on the field too. And I mean, there's a lot of drinking the Kool-Aid, I guess, for lack of a better term, even from the national people. I'm not just talking about Husker people. There's a lot of everybody's talking up Nebraska, who I guess when they're talking about Nebraska, they're saying positive things, and that's because of Matt Rule, but they still have to go prove it on the field. But I am excited to see, the depth and guys like, Cameron. I want to see these second-year players, Cameron Leonard, Prince Waluma and, Van Poppel, Maverick Noonan, Ethan Nation, Demetrius Bell, although he's been injured, so I'm not sure what his status is going to be. Those are the guys I like to see, because they're that second year, you truly do generally see a leap. And I think that, we're going to see a bigger leap with some of these guys, being developed by this coaching staff. So
Jalen Lloyd is a name too. Jalen Lloyd has been getting talked about all spring, and we saw how dynamic he was last year with the time he was given, and now I want to see him take that next step. You mentioned Van Poppel. He's been a guy that's been impressing all spring as well. So, there's a lot of interesting names, and I think, honestly, you mentioned Van Poppel. I think if he can kind of continue to, again, build and, play at a high level, I still remember that goal line stop. I don't know if you were working or at a game or something, because I think you were at a game. But anyway, against Illinois, and he made that goal line stop to kind of halt their drive there, I thought, wow, he's going to be a really special player. And he's so physical. He's very alert. He knows which gaps to fill. I mean, I think he's going to be a really strong player in the coming years. And everybody talks about Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher, and rightly so. But Van Poppel is also going to be a key component on the defensive line.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I want to see Vincent Shavers. He's been one of the most talked about guys. Corey Barney, in terms of, I guess if I was going to say, talking about the freshmen that I want to see in this game on offense, it'd be Dylan Raiola, obviously Daniel Kalen, and then, Ja'Cory Barney, Grant Bricks, Gibson Pyle. But then, on the defensive side of the ball, Vincent Shavers is right near the top of the list. And Nebraska's a little bit thin at linebacker. I mean, that's one of the positions where, it was like maybe they could add a transfer. Or you could have another. I guess they did add a transfer in Stephon Thompson, but Vincent Shavers might be the answer to that question of who's going to be the starting linebacker this year, or one of the starting linebackers inside. And we'll see how he plays on Saturday. I'm excited to see how all those guys play. I think there's a lot of untapped potential, I'll say, in that linebacker room, that inside linebacker room.
For sure. And Willis McGahee, too. I mean, is he on campus, McGahee? I know Shavers is. I don't know if McGahee is yet.
I'm not 100% sure on that. I have to look it up. I feel like he was, but potentially. I mean, we haven't heard much about him this spring, so
yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
100% sure.
He's just another name for, I think, the linebacker room as well. And so there is linebacker depth coming. It's just developing and not on the roster right now. But I think the Florida boys can make a really big impact. Corey Collier is another. I mean, Chief Borders, not Corey Collier. I got my Florida guys mixed up. Chief Borders is a guy that's been making headlines over the past couple days. Rule talked about him and said he was impressed with his development, and all signs point to him, really making a strong impact again on defense. And I'm curious to see what he does too, because again, it's spring practice hype, but can it translate? Even still, it's good to hear Coach call out some of these players for for performing well over these last couple months or so. Really.
Yeah, for sure. Chief Borders has been definitely on the rise. McGahee is an early enrollee, so he's a jack. He's more that outside linebacker type, and that's a pretty crowded position because you got MJ Sherman, Chief Borders, Princewell Umamalian, who was starting there at the end of last year, McGahee. So I mean, that's going to be a pretty stacked position. So that's probably why we have
Thompson too, right?
Well, Thompson's more of an inside linebacker. So yeah,
I could play jack too, but.
No, I mean, potentially, I guess, but the jack is more, those pass rusher types. And right. I think honestly, I mean, I think that there was a reason they moved Umamalian there last year. I think that's like who they want to be in that role.
Which I have no problem with. I mean, he's a really good. He was really good as a freshman. He got to the quarterback quickly, and now it's about just trying to build off that.
But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, McGahee and some of these offensive linemen. But mostly, yeah, want to see what the quarterbacks do. And of course, you can't get, Jeff Sims looked great in the spring game last year. So again, spring ball is kind of like, the preseason. I mean, it's nice to see. It's good to see that it translates, but you have to do it on Saturdays. And Nebraska has not done that for a long time over the last, 3 head coaches. So, I mean, even last year, I thought the team was a lot better than they actually performed. I mean, they weren't a 5-7 team, so that can't happen again this year. And I think the quarterback was the key to fixing it, and we'll see what that looks like on Saturday.
Yeah, and even if we see what it looks like on Saturday, there's no guarantee that it'll translate to the regular season. So, I mean, let's just hope everybody stays healthy. Health is what I'm looking for mostly heading into Saturday. You never want to see anybody get hurt, and they've had a relatively healthy spring. I don't know if I'm missing any injuries off the top of my head, but from all accounts, I've had a relatively healthy spring, and now it's just about, making sure everybody can get out of this game healthy, have things to work on for, summer workouts and things like that, and start looking towards the fall.
Yeah, it'll be an exciting season for Nebraska football, a chance to, get back into the mix, get back to, our winning ways. And hopefully the Nebraska basketball team can keep up with their winning ways. And we have another transfer portal addition coming in this weekend, Connor Segan from Wisconsin. Indiana was in the mix. Michigan was a team that was in the mix. At the end of the day, I think it came down to Nebraska and Indiana. So he was on campus recently and ended up, working out for the Huskers. Kind of an interesting player. He was, all Big Ten as a freshman, averaged 11 points per game, shot 35% from three. And then last year just didn't really play a whole lot, only 7 minutes a game for the Badgers. 3-point percentage dipped down to 30%, but the volume, fell off a lot too. And if you aren't playing much, you're only getting 1 or 2 shots a game. It can be, it can affect your percentage. It's a lot easier to go up or down. So I don't know. He played well against Nebraska in the game. In Madison, he hit some 3-pointers.
Yeah, he was on fire.
So, I mean, I think he can shoot. I think he'll be a good fit, with Nebraska. I think that, they did a nice job of, thinking about, you lost, Tominaga, you lost Jamarcus Lawrence, you lost CJ Wilcher, and now you've kind of added some of those pieces back in Raleigh Wooster, Gavin Griffiths, and now, Connor Segan. So, I mean, yeah, there's not a Keisei Tominaga per se in that group. Maybe Gavin Griffiths can be that guy as a former top 40 overall recruit, but you added a pure point guard in Raleigh Wooster, and you added some 3-point shooting and some guys who've played and proven that they can produce in the Big Ten, which I always think is a plus.
Yeah, and you get a lot of them for multiple years because Griffiths was a sophomore last year, right?
Freshman, so he's got 3 years.
Freshman, and then Segan was a sophomore last year.
Yep, so he's got 2.
Huh?
Yeah, he's got 2 years.
And then Wooster, I'm not sure what his eligibility is.
The other 2 are graduates.
So,
Morgan and Wooster are 1-year guys. So
there's two really good players with multiple years of control, as I call it, and then you have the veteran experience of the grad transfers. So that's at least something you can build your program around. It's not it's not going to be just 1 year and done, which I think is important as you try to build out this program. So I've been really impressed with the transfer portal haul over these last couple weeks. And Segan, I just remember he had a quick release, quick shot, shot really well from the corner. And I just remember that game in Madison back in January when he absolutely destroyed Nebraska coming off the bench. And I'm excited that he will probably have a better chance to reach his full potential here. Depending on his role, I would expect more of, what we saw in 2022-23 than what we saw in 23-24, but who knows?
I mean, if you look at his shooting numbers, and so here's how you can kind of break it down a little bit. But he shot 35% as a freshman from 3-point range. I mean, that's the big thing we're talking about with this kid. But he made 2 3-pointers per game on 5.5 attempts. So he was a high volume shooter, and he made a high volume. I mean, making 2. Nebraska didn't have Tominaga. I don't think even did that last year. Maybe he might have been close in that range, but that's pretty elite, making 2 3-pointers per game, and doing it shooting 35%. So last year, he shot 30% from 3, but as a freshman, he attempted 5.5 threes a game. Last year, it was just 2. So, I mean, again, that's like looking at how many minutes he played. He only played 7 minutes a game. Yeah. So it's like, you're jacking up a couple threes here and there. Maybe there's one night where you're playing 15 minutes, you're shooting 3 or 4. And then some nights you play 5 or 6 and he's only taking 1 or 2. So, I mean, you're not really allowing him to get into a rhythm or playing very much. So that can hurt people. But the thing where I'm not really worried about his shot is, last year he only attempted, in terms of free throws, he only attempted, 11 free throws, but I mean, he made 10 of them. So he shot 90% from the free throw line. The year before he shot 84%. He's an 88% free throw shooter. So that tells you like this guy can shoot, and it's just a matter of, getting him enough volume and enough attempts. He's made 89 3-pointers in 2 seasons. So that's 34%. So I'm not worried at all about, him shooting 30% this year. I feel like he's going to shoot mid-30s from 3 without worrying about it. And I think they're going to have a really interesting battle kind of for that 2-guard spot, Connor Segan and Gavin Griffiths, who's going to start there. And that'll be interesting to see. Ideally, I think it would be great if it could be Griffiths just because he's, longer. I think he's got more upside. But they're both really good shooters. And the thing is you could play all those guys. You could play Wooster. You could play Segan and Griffiths. You could have Gary at the 4. I mean, so it just gives you a lot of lineups, a lot of different things that you can do, but somebody has to take that kind of CJ Wilcher role. And I don't know, to me, it feels like Connor Segan would be perfect for that, but I'm not sure if that's what Fred Hoiberg's thinking, but I think there's going to be an interesting competition there, and whoever doesn't come out of that, Griffiths or Seguin, I think can kind of be that, CJ Wilcher, play 20 minutes of off the bench, defend, be that 2-3 wing combo guy and make a bunch of threes. So I like how both of those pieces can potentially fit with the roster.
I mean, to me, I would think a Seguin could fill that Wilcher role. I mean, he broke the Wisconsin all-time school record for most three-pointers made by a freshman. He had 69 in 2022 and 2023. So, I think he could fill that role, and I'm excited to see what he does with more minutes, hopefully. And I think like you alluded to, another Big Ten transfer, a guy that can play in the Big Ten, guys who are familiar with playing in the Big Ten. I think, honestly, depending on what we hear about Rink Mast, I think this team could make another NCAA tournament run if all the pieces come together.
Yeah, and John Rothstein tweeted something that was kind of interesting about Rink Mast, about
That's
his
exactly what I was
extra.
thinking of when I said that, yeah.
Well, he said something about his extra year of eligibility, so I'm not
Yeah.
sure if there's like a waiver that they're having to try to go through. I do think it's somewhat interesting. We haven't heard anything from Rink at this point. He hasn't, declared for the draft. He hasn't declared for the draft. He hasn't. Obviously, I don't think he's going to the portal. I would think it would be either, going pro or coming back to Nebraska would be his two options. Although, I mean, he could enter the portal if he really wanted to, but I don't see. I mean, he had such a spectacular season in Nebraska that would make zero sense. I'm sure he's getting plenty of NIL money here. I do think he's going to be back. That's my prediction, but that it's taking so long, it makes me think that there's other factors at play. Just the way that, Rothstein worded that, not meaning, guys can't word stuff in a weird way. I don't know if he intended to do that at all, but yeah, that's the one big question. If he comes back, man, this team is freaking loaded. And I think they actually, Joe Lenardi from ESPN put out an early bracketology like a year ahead of time, which I'm not sure why with the transfer portal, but at any rate, Nebraska was seeded as a number 7, and if they get Rink Mast back, I think that makes a lot of sense. I feel really good about this roster. They're still in the mix with William Kyle, the South Dakota State transfer, and man, I think he would just the perfect fit. I know people want Frankie Fiddler and all that, but I don't. He's not coming. Chucky Hepburn's not coming, but William Kyle is legitimate. They're in it with Wake Forest. I think he's coming this weekend though for the spring game, and hopefully that will help lock it down. He is from Bellevue, and they could really use the Summit Defensive Player of the Year. I think that would really be a nice addition to this team. Although I do have to say, I think in Raleigh Wooster and potentially in Gavin Griffiths, they've added some nice defensive pieces too, not just offensive guys.
Yeah, absolutely, and guys that can defend the perimeter, which is important. And so, I think if they keep adding to this roster, like you said, this is a completely loaded, team again, and this is a team that can make the NCAA tournament, still trying to find that first win. But I think if Nebraska can kind of just put all these pieces together, you have a good group, and I think they have the potential to really have another great season in Lincoln.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see, how it all works out because, you've got, I think people are forgetting this, but you do have Aaron Eulis likely coming back this year from his suspension. So he would be, another point guard that they have. But I like the roster.
Yeah, I do too. And, I think if this, as long as this roster can stay healthy, and as long as this roster, because you also have Bryce Williams, Juwan Gary coming back, I think this team is extremely deep and can make another run.
Yeah, so Asian puts them at 10 scholarships, so they've got 3 spots left. And honestly, last year they left a scholarship open, so I'm not sure, if they're going to fill all those spots. But yeah, they could use, another big guy, and then probably another wing. But they've also are in the mix, I think, with some 2024 recruits too. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now they have a solid base, and I think I think as long as they kind of keep finding guys that can work for the style that they want to play, then it's going to be, everything's going to be okay. The mass exodus we saw this year is not going to be is not going to be as big losses as we thought.
And then Danny, you said you had one other football note you wanted to touch on here before we wrap up.
Yeah, really quickly. 3 4-star linemen from Bishop Gorman are coming. SJ Olofatuli, Douglas Utu, and Alai Kalin Valu. I totally butchered those names, but those are something to watch for. 3 4-star linemen, all from Bishop Gorman. Nebraska's been recruiting Bishop Gorman, really hard over these past couple months. They already have Alexander Brugeroli on the roster as a walk-on. So, 3 4-star linemen. Donovan Raiola is still recruiting hard at the position, and we'll see if anything happens with those 3 or if they can, make any traction.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of big names coming up on campus, so we can definitely make that kind of a focal point too for the show on Wednesday, going over all the key recruits to know about, because this is a big official visit weekend. There's a lot of guys coming in for some official visits, some just unofficial, but definitely key talking points. So we'll cover that and anything else that we've got. We'll talk more spring game on Wednesday, break it down a little bit more. So if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. It really helps us out, and will help more Husker fans find our podcast, which, like we said, is for hardcore Husker fans, and HuskerBigRed.com as well. Don't forget to check that out. Have a great week, everybody. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.